Hi everyone. I'm really excited today to be um, inviting uh, Lisa Wilson into having a conversation with us today about their artist residency. So I am going to invite them. Hey, Jason Young. Nice to see you. We're just gonna wait for Lisa to get the invite and then join us. Oh, she's so fast, Lisa. Willie.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. How are you, Heidi?
I'm doing great. You're so fast.
I was waiting. I'm here. I'm ready. Ready to go. Got all
I
my
love this.
books and papers. Um, I'm using headphones. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
We should go
Whoops.
over pronouns before we get too into it too. I go by
Okay.
they, them, and I'm assuming you go by she, her, but I'm not too
She,
sure.
she, her. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks for
sweet. And
asking.
I have my tea right here.
Okay, I have coffee.
Oh, cheers to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, cheers to that.
Yes, and this means I will be up late tonight.
I like that. Yeah, we even got a heart off of that coffee thing. They were like, coffee, I relate to that.
Yeah. Yes. Nice. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I can see people joining, and that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, you can see it. It's encouraging when people join because you're just
Hmm.
like, oh, they're interested.
Hmm.
So I guess the first question I have is, what was your experience of doing the hammock residency for the past month? Like you've been doing it for a little bit longer than that, but you've been posting every day and sharing a lot of work that you've been taking. It looks like quite a big body of work that you've been working on for a while.
Yeah, that's totally true. So, I just want to start by saying that it has been so fun working on this project. And the social media part of it, posting it has been like strangely enjoyable because I don't usually post my artwork anywhere. I usually just keep it to myself and enjoy it within the confines of my home. But actually sharing it has been really cool and watching people respond to it. And the other excellent part about this particular project is that I don't know if many people picked up on this, but it is like truly a collaboration with a 3-year-old. My 3-year-old daughter is completely visual and a tactile. I guess all kids are, but or not all kids, but a lot of kids are really driven by these visual experiences. And she is a craft fanatic. Like she could do crafts all day. She starts her day and ends her day drawing, painting, cutting, whatever is around her. And so I enlisted her help, and she was very eager. Like she's been finding pieces of paper on the ground for me to collage for the past 6 months. So I really like want to mention that this is a collaboration. And during this talk, I'll even show you a couple of new drawings of hers that I'm looking forward to using in a collage.
That's so cool, Lisa.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you highlighted that because I knew it, but I didn't know it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's there, but I mean, I cover her work with like my own ideas, but they're the foundation of every collage.
Cool. Yeah, I'm so curious. Can you show me some of your drawings now? Just
Yeah,
because we're on the
absolutely.
subject.
These are like new ones that I was like, oh, okay, I really need to be able to use this stuff. So this is a caterpillar she made the other day, and you can see it's got like little eyes and a smile. And her like use of color is always really interesting and not always intuitive to us, but it always works out. And here's another one I really look forward to. Like to her, this is like imagery, you know, but to us it just looks like scribbles, but it's to me also very beautiful. And I also just want to show, before I go into more about my actual background and practice, I want to show a full collage she made by herself that has nothing to do with this project but is on our wall, and I just took it down. So
Oh
just so
my
you guys,
goodness, look at that beautiful thing.
yeah, so she made this alongside when I was making one for this project. And one more of hers actually that I really, it's such a different style than I would ever do, but
That's cool.
yeah.
I'm getting
Anyway, so we really
some
feed off
cards,
each other.
Lisa. People are
Yeah,
hearting this.
nice. Yeah, I'm so glad. We have a big collection. I know everyone keeps their kids' art, but yeah, it's been really fun. That's been the highlight for sure. And yeah, do you have other questions to steer me? Because I could
Yeah.
also just launch into some other topics.
I'm really curious what the collages mean to you as a series. Like, is it a complete body of work? Like, if there's themes going through the whole thing, and
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm not like very articulate verbally when it comes to political things. Um, but this, like, I've made about 50 collages in this series, and I started last fall. And my original idea was to do kind of a storyline of my life, my adult life up until this beautiful age of almost 44. And I just couldn't get over like how much of my contemporary life is actually mired in politics, the politics of living in British Columbia right now. It consumes, and politics isn't even the word. It's like the incredible ongoing injustices that so many people face living here. And without getting too serious or dark in this talk, I think it's like extremely dire. And we are headed for some, especially living in Vancouver, like the cost of living, the extraordinary gap in wealth between the different communities of people. And it's a very divisive place, even though I love living here and I want to qualify that. So that juxtaposition is really threaded throughout all of them. Even when I wasn't thinking in a political way, I found that I was inserting these images of like houses, and a house doesn't just mean a house anymore. It's not like a simple
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
Well,
just
we
a
were
piece of
clear
architecture.
to like, yeah. Now
It's
it's like a
very,
symbol of wealth, you know?
yeah, and it's loaded in so many ways. So that brings me to my other thing, and this project is called Archival Projections, because I work in archives and I have been doing so for a very long time. So I have access to a lot of really great imagery that's in the public domain, and I'm really inspired by that imagery. And since I'm not very good at drawing or painting, using it in collage has been really satisfying. So I've been like cruising around in the archives and finding some public domain images here and there. And a lot of them are houses that you'll notice in the collages. So that's where the political aspect kind of threads throughout. Mhm.
That's cool. And like the houses are a symbol for you then in your work.
Yeah, definitely in this project. And that wasn't like planned. It's just sort of one of those things that has
Mhm.
evolved.
Yeah, what do you think is a symbol of for you? Like if you had to distill it,
What is the symbol of what?
what
Pardon?
what do you think the houses are a symbol of for you?
Oh, okay. Probably uncertainty and injustice.
Like
Like for
the
me, on a, yeah,
so funny because as a kid that is like the opposite of what I thought a house was, you know?
yeah,
Like as a
absolutely.
child you're like safety, security, a place to go home to. And then
Hmm.
now as an adult you're like, oh, who gets to own it? Who gets to live in the houses?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, same for me. So this idea of like the archival projections, I'm projecting these ideas from my youth and how they've had been forced into reality and forced to change. And that's exactly what this project is about. So that's really suitable that you mentioned that, like childhood understanding versus your adult understanding. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It doesn't change me from like still wanting to have a house. Like I still like it's one of my goals. It's one of like the top 10 goals.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever attain it, but it's definitely like something that I think about. It's like, wouldn't it be nice if I
Hmm.
owned a house?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Um, I do want to qualify that like we're very fortunate to have secure housing and affordable housing right now. So that's another thing, like just always checking myself to like be like, okay, we are in a position where we can like happily be in Vancouver right now. And that's like really fortunate. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, where do you live? Like just for
We
people that
live in a
don't know.
we live in a housing co-op in the west side in Kitsilano. We've been here for like 3 months, 4 months, and we'll stay for a while because it's really nice and it's definitely community living in a like real way that's pretty rare nowadays. So yeah, enjoying it.
What are some of the themes that you kind of found came up in your series? Like,
Um, okay, so my actual background, like professionally, isn't as an archivist at all. I'm a folklorist. I did my master's in folklore in 2011. I graduated, and I did that at Memorial University in Newfoundland, and I studied architecture, actually, and material culture. So, like folk art, folk artists, traditional artists. I studied myth and legend and the paranormal as like under the banner of belief studies, which is a part of folklore, and why people believe what they believe. And those things are kind of involved with all of the work I do, all those topics. So I noticed like my interest in paranormal and myth and legend definitely made their way into this body of work. Um,
mm,
and basically just underground culture in general. For people who don't know, the study of folkloristics is really a study of how information is transmitted in informal ways rather than like in these very structured academic ways. It's sort of like it doesn't say that those are wrong or bad, but it just puts value on transmission of information from person to person in a more underground or informal way. And so my interest in underground culture is what kind of drew me to that area of study. So that's been with
mm,
me like since I was a child, essentially. And like I don't know like what the audience of this talk is like right now, but I'm thinking we're probably all within the ages of like maybe 35 to 55. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing, but we're like pre-internet kids. We were all like having to find culture in different ways than people do nowadays. So I was really interested in radio as a kid and film. And like those were avenues of finding information for me and like accessing the underground. And yeah, like I don't use that many film references in those collages, but the influence that film had on me, like my whole entire upbringing, is so profound. Like I was also a book kid, but books don't never did like a visual thing for me, whereas like film, I would like watch it and then want to make art or want to be visual, which makes sense because the formats are really conducive for that. But yeah, so film is a big theme in there, even if it's subtle. Um, One movie I was thinking about a lot, I have no idea why, but like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like I saw that as a teenager and I just still think about it as like a iconic, influential film. Um, just like the horror aspect, the musical aspect, the like queer culture, cross-dressing, all of the gender play, all of those things are so exciting to me as a kid, and like I just still feel that way about that movie. I haven't watched it for years. I hope it's still like cool to watch it. I haven't checked in on it
It's a
about it.
cult classic. It's going
Yeah,
nowhere.
yeah. Okay, thank you for saying that. And I'm also like very obsessed with UFOs and aliens, like big time. And I was obsessed with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I wish I could like see people's faces right now to see if anyone's being like, "Oh yes, I love that movie
Yeah,
too."
if people are relating, put it in the chat so we can validate us.
Yeah, Close Encounters and E.T. were just like huge heavy hitters for me. Those are both Spielberg movies, which is weird. I'm not like into Spielberg, but he completely nailed it on those two movies. So these collages also are like from a sort of like UFO psychedelic place for me. Like they are not planned, it's all intuitive, but like I like to think that I can tap into the universe and like tap into that extraterrestrial mindset and that it influences my creativity. And I love that kind of work. And I've studied folk artists who believe that they're doing that. And I just love that playing on that idea. And I studied that during my master's, like people who like actually thought they were communing and maybe were communing with another race of being, another species, and like using their universal mind to create their work, which is, I know that's deep and weird, but it's
I
totally what I love thinking
love it.
about.
I wanted to talk more about it, but I thought I'd just acknowledge that people had hearted you when you were talking, and Jason replies, Jason Youngart is like, yes!
Yes,
So
yeah, thank you.
you're,
Yes, I absolutely love it. I don't, I'm also like into more nerdy like films, you know? Um, but some of those classics from the 70s and 80s that are like really kitschy are just, you know, they will always influence me. Mhm.
mhm. Can you, this is Jason just commented, love, deep, and weird. So I'm just going to ask you, just based on that, like, is there any, like, how, talk a little bit more about the deep and weird themes in your work?
Okay, no problem. Like I could honestly go on. So, I dedicated like a whole collage to this figure, um, and I did a write up about it. It's very brief because like I don't even know what to say, but I grew up listening to Coast AM with Art Bell. So I would like force myself to stay awake as late as possible so that I could hear all of these people from across America calling in and telling their like wild stories, whatever their wild stories are. And often they were about UFOs and aliens or ghosts. And often they were people driving trucks across America in the middle of the night calling in on their radios um, to share like stories from the road. And I found in the archives, I found this collage of old radios that was made by the province of British Columbia in the 1920s to promote something to do with their governmental papers. And we digitized all of this stuff and it's available online. But then all the images that we digitized were being thrown out and we were invited to use them however we wanted. It's called the BC Sessional Papers Collection and it's mostly text, but there's these like really weird images throughout. And I collected some of those and I found these radios. And so throughout the collages, there's probably like 10 of them have these little radios. And all of those are a shout out to Art Bell and Coast to Coast and like my years of listening to that. Yeah.
Cool. What do you
Yeah, I know that.
think, what do you think it was about, like, the paranormal that kind of kept on drawing you to it?
I don't know, like I've wondered that my whole life and I know that it actually I'm like 90% sure it's just a family thing. I think it was something my mom was maybe in tune with and encouraging of. Like from a very liberal, open household, single mom, very excited about interesting things. You know, she's a interesting person, a collector, and a thoughtful person. And she kind of encouraged us to think about those topics. Maybe not encouraged us, but she thought about those things. So she also listened to Coast to Coast. I'm pretty sure she introduced me to it. So, and like for her, I think she got her like paranormal interests or witchy side or whatever from her mother, who is a Ukrainian, you know, her parents were Ukrainian living in the prairies. And our grandmother like wasn't conservative or liberal or anything like that. That whole spectrum of belief was just not relevant for her life. But she was definitely superstitious, and she was a knowledge bearer for her generation. You know, she knew about plants, and she was a homesteader and grew up farming and all of that stuff. So her beliefs, they weren't paranormal, but they're like traditional like folk beliefs, Slavic folk beliefs, and a lot of that was filtered down to us when we were growing up. And my mother was like a sponge for it as well when she was growing up in rural Alberta. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. How do you see those themes showing up in those collages? Like,
Mm.
how do you see that in your artwork?
Well, at the very beginning of this project, the first thing I did was go through some old family photographs. We have a vast collection because my grandfather was like a great photographer, and he was an active photographer his whole life. And he also organized his photos into albums and did that
Mhm.
activity. So we have like lots of albums combined, like between my cousins and us. Like there's probably like 40 or 50 of these old albums. And I don't have many of them digitally available to me. So kind of what I did have, I just printed off. And I was like, I'm going to find a way to integrate them just into these collages, just to have that like autoethnographic part, like, hey, this is where I come from. This is who I am, and it's because of these people, you know,
Mhm.
being here and bringing me into this world this way. So, yeah, there's lots of pictures of them like peeking in throughout the collages. Yeah, like my grandparents on both sides. My great grandparents are there on both sides, and my grandparents and my mom and sister make appearances here and there. So,
Cool. So you
yeah,
have actual family photos in the collages.
yeah, yeah. It's a like my initial project idea was to just mostly use family photos, but then I started finding like really cool old weird illustrations that were in the public domain. And I also have like a pretty big postcard collection. So I scanned, and ones that are from like the public domain, I scanned a bunch of those and used some imagery from there too. They're like unrecognizable because I cut them up so much. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Did you have a sense of like energy that was sort of moving you to make the collages? Like when you get into your studio flow, like is there a certain feeling that you would kind of feel?
Yeah. Well, for this project, I only worked at night, and after work. I'm pretty new back into the workforce. I had a couple of years off taking care of my daughter, which was amazing. But she's now in daycare and I'm now at work at UBC. So we are like exhausted at night, but both of both her and I would sit at the table at night, and I never I always had a stack of imagery that I wanted to use, like a big folder at all times, but I never had a plan ever for one single collage. All of it was completely random and intuitive, like chaotic almost in making them. And that is not the kind of person I am normally. Like I'm very regimented and organized, and I like to have a plan for everything. But this is one area that I just did not want to do any planning at all. I was just like, I'm gonna be intuitive. And like sometimes like even big ones, like there are some really big collages. You can't tell on social media, but they there are like six of them that are 18 by 24 inches.
Oh my goodness. Did you write down the sizes on each of the posts?
I didn't because they vary so much. It would be so much work um, measuring them. It was just beyond my ability at this time. But
But if
yeah,
you
there's
ever
like,
decide it's within your ability, go back and edit that info in.
yeah,
That's so cool.
I would love to. So some of them are like, poster sized, and I would do one in like 2 hours, just like completely intuitively, like just turn off the brain, not think too much, always start with like Marlowe's drawings and then go from there. So it's, yeah, it was a really different way of working for me and really productive, despite having very limited time right now. So
Mhm. Can you talk about that influence of chaos in your life and your practice? Like,
yeah, that's a great idea. I am not attracted to chaos at all. Um, I know some people are, and some people really feed on it. Um, I think as someone who has done a lot of work in archives in various ways, like I've been a cultural researcher and I've had to organize collections to put into archives. I've had to digitize to work in archives. Like you have to be so almost anal about keeping organized. So I like veer away from chaos. But the way I've collected material for this has been like one of the most chaotic things I've ever done. Like there's a bin on our floor just filled with all this old imagery and like whatever I could find that I found interesting, just stuffed in there, like not organized at all. Or I don't know, basically just giving myself permission to not care that it's organized and just and like some of these collages are quite thick because if I didn't like something, I just like didn't even mind. I just slapped something over top. So like despite not being chaotic, I really think there's a value to just letting yourself be that way sometimes. Like it just worked out. And I knew exactly when I was done making work. It was just like
mhm.
suddenly my favorite imagery was used up in ways that I liked, and I was just ready to be done. I just looked over at Marlowe's drawing. I just find this hilarious. Or at her collage, there's this like guy with sunglasses in her picture, which I find hilarious. And these are three Ukrainian eggs, Pisanki, that are work in progress shots that my sister took of her art practice. And she's like a very accomplished Ukrainian egg writer. So this is the last stage where this is covered in wax completely. And you burn this off and wipe it away, and underneath is revealed like extremely vibrant color and intricate details that are not chaotic whatsoever. And her artwork is actually throughout my collages as well.
Hmm.
And I know she's enjoyed seeing them pop up there.
That's so cool. Do you feel like you learned something about yourself through making these collages?
Um, yeah, I guess like in terms of art practice, I feel more like a collage artist now. Like I've always made collages, that's not new to me, but I used to kind of mix that in with painting or drawing. Now I'm just like feeling so connected to this way of making art that I don't mind not making other kinds right now. Like I have so many paints and I'm not even really attracted to them except to give them to Marlo for her.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been a big learning experience for me, definitely. Yeah.
Interesting. What does it feel like to identify as a collage artist?
Mm, It's like, I know this is maybe, well, it's exciting, but it's also like a relief or something, a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a relief because now I can just kind of focus on one thing. Like I'm always trying to do multiple things. I think a lot of people are like that, multitasking, going for different projects at the same time. I I'm gonna yawn too.
So yawny. I'm so yawning right now.
Yeah,
I've
it's
been up
almost
so
four,
rough.
so yeah, it's like past nap time. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I like the idea of like focusing and my chaotic and casual approach to this project. I'm gonna hang on to that for sure and like bring it into my new works.
Oh.
And like I was thinking about it, and I think I'd really like to keep my connection to my daughter in this way too,
Hmm.
because she like really talks about making art a lot. And if that's one gift I can give her in her childhood, like encouraging that, then I'll definitely want to pursue that.
Mm. That's so beautiful, the idea of like passing on the artistic legacy.
Well, and it wouldn't be that unusual for us because we have so many artists in our family. Like my cousin Sasha is an incredible oil painter. She does like realistic, photorealistic paintings. My sister is this incredible Pisanki artist. On our dad's side, our grandmother was an artist. My grandfather on my mom's side was a wonderful artist and he taught art in school. So, yeah, and we don't know much about deeper generations, but or what they were like or who they were, but in current generations, we have quite a few people that have
Mm.
learned it from each other.
Okay, Jason Youngart says that's really inspiring, interesting and inspiring the collaborative aspect with your daughter.
Thank you.
Totally.
And also, like, very unplanned. Like, I feel like as a parent, it is so, I would swear like 100 times right now, it is so hard being a parent. Like, we became parents at age 40. Like, oh my gosh, what a wild thing to do to yourself. Yeah, that's good,
What
Jake.
do
I'm
you
getting,
think? What? Let's talk about that. Like, what is it like being a parent at 40?
it's very, very hard. It is like, talk about chaos. Toddlers are like the embodiment of chaos. Like she is so attracted to danger and like doing things that she's just a really bright, amazingly sweet kid and so creative. She's amazing, but kids in general are very like, hey, I want to grab that thing, even if I'm running across the road dangerously. So like our hearts are always just like pounding in our chest. Like, oh my God, it's so hard keeping order in a chaotic world. And we just want her to be safe, right? So yeah, it's hard. But this is a way of me helping keep being able to do something and give her an activity at the same time. Like if we work on something together, then we both get something done. But if I'm trying to do it alone and don't involve her, she won't learn from it or be engaged. So yeah, it's been like it wasn't a plan, but I'm really glad it turned out that way. And I just wanted to mention another thing, like in terms of Marlo's creative self, and I'm not going to push that on her if she's not interested when she's older. We know better than doing that. But she also has, she's got Ukrainian ancestry through us, Scottish, and she's also Métis and English from her dad's side. And her Métis grandfather was also an incredibly accomplished artist. And I just like want to give him a huge shout out. He's now deceased, but he was a disabled hand and or a mouth and foot painter. So he
Okay,
created like
repeat that.
he lived with the disability of not having arms, and he made incredible paintings using his mouth and feet. So like I'm really inspired by people with different abilities who persevere and like learn how to do what they want to do. And like he's someone who really inspired, like overcame so many hurdles and challenges. And like that genetic code is like in my daughter, and I'm so proud and happy for her that she has
Hmm.
that. Even though she's never going to know her grandfather in person because he passed away right before she was born. Yeah.
Hmm. But it's still like in her genetic memory.
Yeah, totally. And
And that's
we have
like,
the deep prairie connection too with her being Métis and Ukrainian Canadian.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that like resistance that she has, like just like, okay, this is like with your her grandfather that didn't have hands and like still painted with his hands, his mouth and his feet. Like it's like I love creating, I love painting. How can I still do this? Like how can I find a way to still do this? How can I find a way, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and he was prolific too, like hundreds of paintings maybe, and we're lucky enough to have a couple in our collection. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah, I'm very, very happy that I've gotten to be part of this side of the family through my partner. Yeah.
Is your mom an artist as well?
Um, she is like she is such a creative person. I would call her a crafts person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
she's
kind
always
of a
doing.
folklorist in that way.
Yeah. Well, the folklorist in me comes from her side of the family. Like, I would say my grandfather, if he'd known about that, he would have been a folklorist. He was like very much about cultural history and
I feel like
like
a
I learned all that.
folklorist.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you definitely are. Yeah. So, like one other thing I know we're like running a bit low on time, but one other, I don't want to bore everyone who's joined us,
No,
but
no. It's fine. As we usually wrap up at around an hour and
okay.
15, something like that. So we
Okay.
got some time.
Okay.
We're not there's still four people.
Okay,
There's
great.
four people listening to
That's
us.
so excellent. Thank you so much. Um, so I was going to say,
They've
like,
got a heart for it. They're still engaged.
yes, yes. One of the things I have done in my previous art practices is really connected to being a folklorist, and it's something I learned in my studies as a folklorist. But I started taking audio sound recordings of my environment back then, like probably starting in before then, probably 2005, like with an old mini disc recorder.
Hmm.
I would do ambient sound recordings of nature or cityscapes or my personal surroundings. And that's something my grandfather did as well. And he left that legacy and they were on cassette tapes. And I digitized all of those, and I've worked with his sound recordings with mine as well and done like audio collage with that.
Cool.
And his recordings were so cool because they are of a different generation, like you can hear marching bands and horse hooves and the sound of a train or thunder and lightning or a kettle boiling. Birds was another thing that he recorded, a lot of bird sounds, like wind in the trees, all of that stuff.
Wow.
So he kind of sh- showed me the value of those kinds of recordings. Maybe not tomorrow, but me finding them, in my 30s was kind of huge in my like development as a person. Like, oh, he left this for us, and that's like so
Hmm.
meaningful, and I can do that for someone else in the future, either Marlo or her family, or if she chooses that, or other people. Yeah.
That's so cool. It's like a theme that's bigger. I mean, the work itself has like, your collage work has like pictures and images and sizes and dimensions, but like the
Hmm.
larger theme is just like your family,
It
you
is,
know?
yeah. Yeah, and like that, like it's just, I guess that is, it's weird. Like so many times during the project, I was like, oh, I'm not doing the project I said I was going to do. It's not really autoethnographic. It's more random and chaotic. But then
Hmm.
upon reflection, it came full circle, and it actually is very much about being autoethnographic and
Hmm.
being about who we are and where we come from. And like I can't not mention that it's very connected to this sort of punk rock upbringing that I had as well, and like punk rock ideology, sort of like the stick it to the man stuff that I still live by. Um, I just really still relate to that sort of like kind of ignoring the political spectrum that is so arbitrary and sort of doing what works best for us in a sort of irreverent way. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
making art that is a reflection of that punk ethos is really important to me. And also like I'm not really that into the establishment in terms of the art world. Like I feel like it's very bureaucratic, alienating, white supremacist, all of the things, sexist, all of the things that I don't really value in my interactions with institutions is
Mm-hmm.
very, oh yeah, I'm seeing a comment from like an old friend of mine who's a really amazing artist, Terrence Houle, who says, we did the punk rocks back in the day. Yes, we did. I know him from growing up, so he knows what's up. He's Albertan as well, from Alberta. Okay, so yeah, the punk.
What's the Albertan punk rock scene like?
Well, it was pretty good because it had to be. Like, we were in Calgary. I think that TJ's family's from a reservation outside of Calgary, I think south of Calgary. But there's like an urban experience in Calgary that was growing and developing in the 80s and 90s. And in the 90s, that sort of disillusioned youth experience definitely came in, and it started off with kind of like late 80s metal, morphed into sort of like traditional like punk experience, pop punk, and like that's sort of when I started, 93 or so. 90, I was quite young, like 13, and it was youth that were like not quite fitting in with the sort of jockey vibes of the schools, cowboy jocks, and
Mm-hmm.
found a place to like express different ideas or underground ideas or just be a part of the underground culture. So I would say it was like really, really good. It was always understood that Edmonton's was better. That's still probably like debatable. There's always those rivalries, but it wasn't enough of a community to keep me in that city though, and I still feel that way. Yeah.
When you moved to Vancouver, did you get involved with like Vancouver punk rock and art scenes here?
Yeah, well, I actually moved to Victoria when I was not
Oh,
even
that's
18 yet.
why I didn't see you
Yeah,
in Vancouver. I was
yeah.
like, were you just involved in like the opposite? I know that
No,
you know how there's
I,
like so many little subcultures and like because I didn't meet you until way later.
yeah, true. And like I did center myself more in Victoria for many years, and I definitely got a whole crew of friends from that, and a lot of them live in Vancouver now, and I still know them. Yeah, definitely. Like that was part of my early university experience was like going to punk rock shows and meeting people and stuff. And I eventually moved in over to Vancouver and met some people here too. So I've been living here off and on for like 10, no, 20. The first time I lived here was over 20 years ago, but I've moved around a lot. Now I'm back. So
Where
been
were
back for
you
6 years.
moving? Like where were you moving around?
I moved to Montreal. I did part of that experience of like not having to make much money to survive and just really enjoy making art. I really developed as an idea of an art practice when I was living in Montreal because I had time to do that, and having affordable rent was a part of that. And it was also more of like a bohemian culture there where it's more valued to take time to make things like art. And so I started painting when I was probably 25 there, and I painted for quite a long time, like definitely rooted in a folk art tradition. And that was always my interest, is like making kind of folk art paintings. Um, but like I have to say, I don't really miss the messiness of that, and I prefer the messiness of working with bits of paper. And
Hmm.
so yeah, Montreal was a creative time for me. And then I did my master's degree in Newfoundland, and I developed my cultural history research um, persona. I became an oral history interviewer, and I made a very big practice out of that, interviewing at least a couple of hundred people on various folk art related topics. And um, yeah, a lot of that information is I added to the Creative Commons, and it's available in digital archives for future
Cool.
use. Yeah,
That's neat.
yeah, yeah. So my whole like approach to my career has really been about um, accessibility of information. Yeah,
Hmm.
and like helping people transmit knowledge in a non-academic way.
In a folklorist way. You get a
Yeah,
heart. Yeah, just
yeah,
in a
yeah.
real way. And it's so weird because art gets so academicized and like then you want to monetize it and make money off it because you want to be an artist and you have to find a gallery and you have to
Hmm.
have people that are selling your work and who is buying the work, but the upper class is buying your work and they're not necessarily the people that there's no connected to that folklore, you know,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
how you always get started in it is because someone met somebody who told someone and you end up, forming yourself as a community and then getting involved in art. Like that's like the roots of
Absolutely.
art are so folklore, but then like
Yeah.
how you actually like the machine of art or like
Well, here's a bit of Canadiana that I'm sure everyone on this talk knows about. The perfect example of that, like monetization, is Maud Lewis from Nova Scotia, the incredible folk art painter who was an obsessive, amazing artist and like created art wherever she went and built her house into a little art piece. And you can actually, I don't know if anyone knows this, but you can visit her house at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, and they have like moved her house into the art gallery permanently. So you can walk around it and see she decorated it so beautifully. Now her little paintings that were sold to tourists that are like, just, these small paintings are worth like $30,000 and they're
whoa.
highly coveted, but she would just sell them for like 20, 10, $20 here and there to tourists just to make ends meet. And then it is like so impossible to now own a Maud Lewis painting, like is it, her legacy isn't getting anything from that monetization, other than her name is more known. She's getting some respect in that way, but it's not like her family is getting anything out of
Yeah, there's
this.
no intergenerational wealth being created from her.
No, it's just these private collectors, snapping it up and reselling it. And it just sort of loses a bit of its magic. Like one of my favorite pieces of artwork that I have by far is a folk art painting that I got in North Van at the Salvation Army thrift store. And it's an oil painting, like quite, you can't see my hands. It's quite big, oil painting of, it looks like a New York street scene or something with brick buildings and little stairways, and like there's a woman washing laundry in a bin, and they're like really, it's obviously like an amateur artist or folk artist who made it, and it's from 1966, and I've looked up the name so many times and there's nothing on the internet, but anyway, it's just this incredible gem that I got for $5, and it will always be my most valuable piece of art, even though it's not valuable to anyone else. And that's what I like about folk art is just the accessibility of it, the fact that anyone can make it. If you have any passion at all for art, you can make art. You don't have to like live by these standards or make art by these standards that are completely arbitrary and commercial and capitalistic and institutional and not necessary in making art. So this project I've been doing is really about that as well.
Well, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. How do you see that, like in the collages? Like, do you see certain themes or compositions kind of happening?
Um, well, yes, I do, in that they are very unesthetic in a way. I mean, some people
Like
might,
anti-aesthetics, like
yeah,
that.
yeah, the idea that I was like purposefully kind of going for an anti-aesthetic approach is actually very much true. Like I don't care if anyone finds them interesting or aesthetically pleasing or not, because that's not the point of them. What is the fist?
Well, I was thinking like resist, but like I
Oh, the
have a,
resist fist. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, resist. Yeah, that's how I
except
feel
it's just
about it.
from a model. It's just from a mannequin.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I resist those ideas. And
Resist those ideas.
yeah, and like there's the minimalism of contemporary art. I think I wrote about that in my artist statement, but isn't like that interesting to me. Like I don't mind it. I actually like am really drawn to it sometimes,
Mhm.
but I wanted to go for like maximalism, like fill a page with stuff and like not overthink it, just fill a page with stuff and just make it a project out of it. And so I really lived true to that project idea. Every page is just like completely covered in images.
Hmm. I love that.
And I made about 50 collages, and I think I'll be showing 28 in this project.
Do you
And the other
wish it
one,
would have doubled up so you could have shown them
um,
all?
there's reasons why I didn't show the other one, so
Why
probably
didn't you
not.
show
But
the other ones? I'm curious.
um, like they just didn't have enough of a focal point. Like there's a few that I made that like I couldn't, there's no focal point in them. So they didn't bring up anything for me to write about. And I was
Mhm.
really interested in writing something. So they're more like just pure
Oh, I'm glad
chaos.
you're talking about this because I was
Yeah.
really wanting to know about your writing and the process of writing because you always have these nice, thoughtful blurbs or responses to the images.
Yeah. Like that was always my idea for them to be companions. I completely ran out of stuff to talk about. So I stopped doing those blurbs like a few days ago. But I felt very satisfied with how many I did. I was like, yeah, okay. All of my, because I wrote a list of 50 topics I wanted to integrate into this
Hmm.
project. Like last year, I wrote this
I
list.
remember our early talks about this project.
Yeah,
You're like
yeah,
motherhood, punk rock, exhaustion,
yeah,
happiness, stability, housing, ancestry, you know?
yeah, exactly. All of those words made it into my write-ups, like all of those ideas or concepts. So I felt like really satisfied. And then the last few are just kind of speaking for themselves. But yeah, the writing ups were a big part of it for me. Like, not to explain the work by any means, just to explain where my head is while I'm looking at the work, or
Mm-hmm.
while I'm experiencing it. Yeah.
Totally. I like that. I like
Hmm.
that. Well, I do feel
Hmm.
like we finished. We've like
Hmm.
we've covered so much.
Yeah.
I feel satisfied with our with I feel
Yes.
satisfied.
Once again, I've like run out of stuff to talk about. So yeah,
It's
that
perfect.
that's
I feel
perfect.
satisfied at the
Yeah.
moment that you run out of things to talk
Yeah,
about.
like I actually made myself like a little list of things that if I ever stopped talking, I could just look down
Oh
and
yeah,
like all of these
read about.
things came up completely naturally anyway. The only thing I didn't mention is if I do have 2 minutes, like
Yeah, you do.
another, like I'm really, and it's not just because of like Ukraine being war torn. I'm very much like involved in being a Ukrainian Canadian, and it's a huge part of my identity. It has been since I was a child, growing up in a family with a very distinct culture, and I really owe it to my mom for like bringing that to us. And by the way, my sister is also an amazing Ukrainian folk dancer. Um, but I just wanted to say, like, the Ukrainian settlement that happened at the turn of the 20th century, like I've read about what brought my great grandparents over with kids and stuff in these
Hmm.
incredibly challenging trips. And of course, it was poverty and persecution, and it was also false pretenses. The government was pitching them this story of free land, and but that land wasn't theirs to give. And like I just want to say that like as a Ukrainian diaspora member of the diaspora in Canada, like I fully support land back and in all shapes and sizes wherever we can across this entire false nation. And like, just because I'm super proud of being Ukrainian Canadian from the prairies and super happy I had that, doesn't mean I think that this is like how it should have been. And I'm still very like land back is just my last thing I wanted to say.
Oh, let's talk about that for a little bit, just because that was too good. Like, that is such a good nuance. And some people, like, I'm first generation immigrant as well. My parents are from Holland, and I'm the first generation born here. And like, I'm really Dutch Canadian in a lot of ways. We were raised with a lot of Dutch background, but like, just because I'm proud of being Dutch doesn't mean that I'm like
Hmm.
happy with displacing Native people here. You know, like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's my right to be here. I think it's sort of an accident that we were here, and bad news on the side of the government for like advertising that it was like good for immigrants to come over when
For
there was
what
people
for
like
white immigrants too. It should be
exactly.
qualified. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
there's
that's a bit of a
people
stain, isn't
here
it?
that have need places to live and are housing and are having a way of life and like
Yeah. And that's a lot of like what's in this body of work too, is the idea of British Columbia is like so eye roll for me. And um I actually like ripped up these like government of BC public domain images from like 1910 and used those a lot in the pieces to kind of get my frustration out about that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is
So
frustrating because, like, at this point, I'm not going to go back to Holland. Like, what?
yeah, well, we're
That's
not
not gonna.
allowed. Yeah, it's tough. It's a really weird, like unfortunate.
Yeah,
It's
it's
an
super unfortunate.
unfortunate nation, really, if you
Yeah,
believe in nations. Okay. But yeah, anyway, respect to all of our Indigenous brothers and sisters.
big time.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm out of juice.
All right. Well, it
Yeah.
was awesome talking with you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. It was so great. You're
Yeah.
just so fascinating. You have a great brain.
Thank you so much for having me and having me part of this residency. I look forward to like our next parts. There's a few more things coming out. We're
Yeah, there's an
working on a
exhibition and
publication.
a publication.
Yeah.
So November
So
5th, if you're around at James Black Gallery, that's where we're going to have the exhibition, and you can see more work by Lisa. Yeah,
yeah.
we're so too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really, really excited to be a part of this. And also,
Yay,
like,
thank you.
also, I really appreciate the ability and disability awareness of this project, and I think all art projects should really be like that because, as you know, that is a like an issue that's close to our hearts in my family. So,
Yeah, I mean, mine
yeah,
too.
yeah. Okay, thanks
Mine
a
too.
lot, Heidi.
You're so
Okay,
welcome. Have
and
a
bye
great day.
everyone to
Thank
my
you for
friends that are still in here.
listening, everybody. We
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.